and you're the bored cyborg.
Oh, come on, why do I gotta be the bored cyborg?
Because it's your channel, you moron.
Makes sense. Welcome back to yet another episode. This is something a little bit different for the channel. I am joining the YouTube film community ranks and doing my own ranking video. This one is going to be on a director that I'm very fond of for multiple reasons. One is nostalgia. Two, I think he's one of the best directors of our generation, and that is Quentin Tarantino. I'm going to be counting down all of his films in excitement and hype for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is a film I'm going to try to go out and see this weekend. I'm not sure where it's going to fall. Of course, I haven't seen it, haven't seen any trailers, don't know much about it, going into it blind, which is what I always do with films, especially Tarantino's. I've seen pretty much all of his films in theaters, save for Jackie Brown, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction, because I was very young. I'd be interested to know what your ranking of Quentin Tarantino's films looks like, so feel free to leave that in the comments below. It'll be nice to see how different everybody's lists are, because I'm sure they're going to be. Before I get to the ranking, I want to discuss with you guys my background with Quentin Tarantino. I have a very deep connection to the man and his films, especially when I was growing up. So, essentially, the first time I heard about a Quentin Tarantino movie was Jackie Brown. And I was in maybe 5th grade, I was 9 years old. I had asked my parents if I could see the movie, and for probably the first time ever, they said, no, I cannot, because of the themes, and because of the adult nature of it, the nudity, the sex, the violence, all the stuff that I wanted to see as a 9-year-old. And a lot, I saw a lot of films that I would consider worse than Jackie Brown when I was growing up, so it was just one of those weird things. Flash forward a few years when I was in middle school, and I had a little bit more autonomy, I suppose. I had the internet, so I was able to start tracking down these films that my parents didn't want me to watch when I was younger. The first film that I ever watched from Tarantino was Pulp Fiction, and it totally blew my mind, and I was hooked. The man's work was unlike anything I had ever seen. I loved his style of storytelling. I loved how lurid his vision was, and how gritty and how violent. I just loved everything about it. So after that, I started tracking down the rest of his work, and I've been a huge fan ever since. He may be my favorite director of all time. Definitely top 5, most likely top 3. I haven't really done a ranking list for that. Growing up, he was one of the first filmmakers that inspired me to write my own stories, and still inspires me to this day. And he got me through a lot of tough times when I was in my early teens. Tarantino and Scorsese, those two guys are the directors that got me to look at film as art. And so, with that out of the way, let's get to my ranking. Now, this box set pretty much has all of Tarantino's films. I have a couple down here that I will switch out as we go, but this is basically going to be on screen the entire time because it contains all of his films. With that said, my number 9 is Death Proof. Don't get me wrong, I still really enjoy Death Proof. Saying this is my least favorite Tarantino movie, I still rate it like a 3.5 out of 5. I still really do enjoy the movie, and it's such a great throwback to old films like The French Connection, car chase films from the 70s, and Vanishing Point, things like that, The Driver, and it has a lot of things going for it. One is Kurt Russell, probably the greatest character in the film. It's so good to see him hamming it up and just chewing up the scenery. The group of women, fantastic. They're all great. The banter between them is very natural, as always in Tarantino films. And what sets this film apart from so many other films today are the car chases. He absolutely nails it. In my opinion, one of the best car chases in film history at the end of this film, or at the last 45 minutes of this movie. Such a fantastic car chase, and I love that scene when when the first group of girls is driving the car and they're being stalked by Kurt Russell, and he hits them, and their limbs are flying out of the car all over the place. It's just Tarantino goriness at its best. I really do enjoy Death Proof, but it is my least favorite Tarantino film, and it falls at number 9. Next up is Jackie Brown, the film that I wanted to see when I was in 5th grade, when I was 9 years old, and my parents wouldn't let me for probably the first time in history. They wouldn't let me watch it. But years later, I would, when I was 13, 14 years old. I think it was the third one of his that I had seen, and I remember liking it. but not liking it as much as Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. And to be honest, that's still where I stand with it. I rewatched it for the third time a few nights ago in preparation for this video, and I think it holds up really, really well. I think it's a great throwback to the 70s. It's not quite a blaxploitation film. It's more of a 70s crime film with blaxploitation elements, I would say. I wouldn't call it a blaxploitation film, even though it has Pam Grier as Jackie Brown, which is obviously a play on Foxy Brown. And that's the thing about Tarantino. So many of his films are obviously inspired by the stuff he grew up with, which is part of the reason why I love him so much. And Jackie Brown, Pam Grier's great. The characters are fantastic. De Niro in such an underrated performance as, I think his name is Joe Gara. Sam Jack in an underrated performance. The cast is phenomenal. Tom Berenger, so fantastic. And Tom Berenger was in a lot of 70s films like Vigilante and a lot of exploitation, so that's why Tarantino got him in this one. You know, it follows Pam Grier's character, Jackie Brown, who sees an opportunity to make some money and rip off some gangsters. I guess the crime story just isn't as captivating as a lot of the other stories that Tarantino has told. And that's my criticism of it. I think the pacing is a little off. I think it is a little slow at points for sure. There isn't much action at all. It's not an action film at all. But I love 70s crime, and there are a lot of 70s crime films that I think do it better than Jackie Brown. But Jackie Brown is still a great film. It's a film I'll watch again and again, maybe every 5 years or 6 years or so. And it is my number 8. Moving on to number 7, it's also in this collection. That is Kill Bill 2. Man, I wish we had the whole bloody affair so I could see the whole bloody movie, all 4 hours of it, uncut, and just sit down and watch the whole thing and judge it for being one film, because that's how Tarantino wanted that was his vision. He wanted this to be one 4-hour-long epic action film. That's not what we got. We got 2 different movies, and I do judge them separately. With that said, Kill Bill Volume 2 is my number 7 favorite Tarantino film of all time. I love Kill Bill 2. I think it's actually paced better than Kill Bill Volume 1, even though I still enjoy Volume 1 more. There's not as much action in Volume 2, but the action that is there is fantastic, like the training sequences with Pai Mei, and the sequences with Bud, and Daryl Hannah's character, who I'm forgetting, but I think the film's the only issue I have with Kill Bill Volume 2, a couple things. She doesn't kill Bud, Daryl Hannah's character does, and Daryl Hannah's character, we don't know if she dies, which is fine, you know, setting up for a third film or whatever, but I don't know, she's got the list, and the list really has meaning to me, and as she crosses them out, it's like, can she really cross out Bud knowing that she didn't kill him? You know what I mean? I don't know. I see what Tarantino was trying to do there. He was trying to subvert our expectations, and he did so. And there's a setup with Bud where he's talking to his brother Bill about his Hattori Hanzo sword and how he pawned it away and how good he is with a sword, and man, what a wasted, squandered opportunity. I know Michael Madsen's not a sword fighter, but I wish we could have gotten Bud and Beatrix in a sword battle, in a sword duel, an old school samurai battle, from things like Lone Wolf and Cub, which I know he's a huge fan of, which actually makes an appearance in this film, Shogun Assassin, or at least the sound does. But it is what it is. The film that we got is still remarkable. It's a great closure to the Kill Bill story, and I absolutely love it. It is my number 7. Alright, so I'm removing the box set from the table for the first time for my number 6, and that is Django Unchained. God damn, do I love this movie. As a big fan of spaghetti westerns, I watched a ton of them in my early teen years. Pretty much because of Tarantino, I watched Good, Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, all the Sergio Leone stuff, Clint Eastwood stuff. I fell in love with this movie the first time I watched it. In fact, it's one of the few movies I could say that as soon as the movie was over, I watched it again. And it ended at like 11 o'clock, and I had to watch the movie again, and it's not a short movie. So I was up until the wee hours of the morning rewatching Django Unchained. The film absolutely blew me away, and I still love it so much to this day. The film features Jamie Foxx, who plays a slave that is on the long, arduous road to freeing himself, to becoming a free man. And it's just a beautiful and poignant story, one of the most poignant stories that Tarantino has told. Some scenes that just, really mess you up and really make you empathize with these characters. Not only is Jamie Foxx brilliant as Django, but Christoph Waltz in, again, one of the best performances in any Tarantino film that I've ever seen. And coming off Inglourious Basterds, where he played a seething villain, he was the mentor to Django's character, who was our hero in this movie. The ending of this film, the climax, is one of the funniest and most violent Tarantino endings and climaxes to any movie, and god damn is it satisfying. I love Django Unchained, and I love Django, if you guys could see it up there, which is another fantastic film that obviously Tarantino was inspired by. But man, Django Unchained is a better movie, I think, overall. The score, the soundtrack, everything about Django Unchained is phenomenal. One of the best spaghetti westerns of all time, even though it's not really technically one, because it wasn't made in Italy by an Italian director, but whatever. One of the best westerns of all time. Absolutely love Django Unchained. It's my number 6. Alright, next up, we're putting the box set back on the table here. My number 5 is a film that climbed 2 spots on my recent rewatch. I saw it in theaters when it came out in 2009, and that is Inglourious Basterds. Wow. I think the first half of this film is perfect. The second half, there's a sequence or two that sort of make it slow down a little bit, lag a little bit. But other than that, I think the film is a fucking masterpiece. I think it's Tarantino's best made film. Technical-wise, cinematography, the shot selection, the narrative structure, I think this is his best structured and best made film. It's not my favorite, but I can notice that it is a masterwork. I absolutely love Inglourious Basterds. It's a story, it's, based on the Dirty Dozen, pretty much. And it follows, there's a lot of different things going on. One is Shoshana. The opening sequence to this movie is one of the most tense. It's my favorite opening sequence in any Tarantino movie, and maybe any film, probably top 10. It's so brilliantly tense and so perfectly paced, and Christoph Waltz is such a prick, and you hate him as soon as you see him, and man, it's a poignant beginning. So one of the stories follows Shoshana, who escapes from the siege in the beginning, and opens up runs a movie theater in France. And then, of course, there's the story of Brad Pitt and his Jewish Nazi hunters. Aldo Raine is the character that Brad Pitt plays, and man, he does such a great job. The funniest scene in the movie is when he's pretending to be Italian. Buongiorno. It's just brilliant comedic stuff, man. And so it's basically these 2 stories and a third about Frederick Zoller. Frederick Zoller is in a movie called Nation's Pride, which is being produced by Joseph Goebbels and Hitler's. There's so much going on in this movie, but it all culminates in a climax that is so satisfying, and you can tell Tarantino is just having such a good time killing Nazis, and goddamn did the audience, including myself, love it as well. So many great characters. The Bear Jew, played by Eli Roth, who does such a great job, such an intimidating character for him to play. He really buffed up for that role too. Every character in this film is fantastic. It's definitely Tarantino's most tense film, and it's his best made film in my opinion. Although it's not my favorite, hence why it is number 5, Inglourious Basterds. Alright, leaving the box set here again for my number 4, and it's a film that I'm very nostalgic for and very fond of. I saw it in theaters back in 2003. That is Kill Bill Volume 1. Again, I saw this in theaters when it came out. I was 15 years old, and my father and I went to go see it, and man, did we have such a great time with Kill Bill Volume 1. It was the first Tarantino film that I was able to be excited for. I was following it for 3 years before it came out, 3 to 4 years before it came out on good old IMDb, and I was checking it every week to see where the production was, and it was 6 years between this between Jackie Brown and Kill Bill. And it's because it was such a big production. It was a 4-hour production for him, between Volume 1 and 2. And man, seeing this in theaters, my first Tarantino film in theaters, absolutely blew me away. I was a huge hip-hop fan, still am a huge hip-hop fan, so knowing that RZA did the music when I was 15, I was all about that. I had the soundtrack downloaded and everything. It was just such a wonderful time in my life to be watching movies and to be learning about film. And Kill Bill Volume 1 didn't disappoint. My favorite scene, of course, is the battle with the Crazy 88s at the end with Gordon Liu and Go-Go with the mace. Just such a fantastic scene. The fact that we don't have this scene uncut, when she snatches the eye out and it goes black and white. The fact that we can't see this uncut at this point is just absolutely ridiculous. I know we can. I think there are ways to do it. But I want to sit down and watch the whole movie how it was meant to be watched. And with all the gore and the arterial sprays and all of that, I mean, for Christ's sake, they were doing it in martial arts movies in the 70s, and they felt the need to cut it in this. It's so aggravating. With that said, it was a wise artistic choice to go with the black and white after the eye snatch, and after she blinks, it comes back to color. But still, man, the anime sequence in this is phenomenal. The backstory about Ishii, the cast, Lucy Liu, I mean, there's so much to talk about with these movies, and I'd be here for hours if I indulged myself. So I can't do that, but with that said, Kill Bill Volume 1, one of my favorite Tarantino films, my number 4 of all time. Alright, removing the box set yet again, for the last time actually, it is my number 3. It is Hateful Eight. I am ashamed to say that I did not see this in theater. I didn't see it. I didn't even see the 70mm print or any print. I don't know what was going on in my life at that time, but I was unable to see the film in theaters. But man, when I sat down and watched this in the winter, it wasn't snowing down here in North Carolina, but it was cold outside. It was frigid, and this film made me feel even more frigid and cold and shivering because of the setting. And I fell in love with this movie the first time I saw it. Man, where do I even start? The cast of characters is brilliant. Everyone from Michael Madsen to Sam Jack to Kurt Russell to Jennifer Jason Leigh. Everything about the cast is pinpoint perfect. Bruce Dern, I can go on and on. And obviously it's Tarantino's Western, but I also think it's Tarantino's straight up horror film. This obviously was inspired by The Thing, which is my second favorite film of all time. Some days it's my favorite film of all time. I didn't read anything about this movie going in. When that all clicked for me and I heard Ennio Morricone's music and I saw the setting and the character dilemmas and the tension, it all reminded me of The Thing. And it's so masterfully done. Not as good as The Thing, but it comes close. Nobody else could come as close as Tarantino did with The Hateful Eight. I absolutely love this movie. Some sequences that are just so violent, so crude, and so Tarantino. I love The Hateful Eight. I can't wait to rewatch it again. I've heard the uncut version is on Netflix. Not sure if it still is, but I need to check that out. I'm sure I'm going to love it even more. Epic, grandiose. It's just the scale of this movie. Even though it all takes place in one place, you just feel so isolated in a huge world. This is a masterpiece. This is one of his masterpieces. The other two I'll be talking about shortly. The Hateful Eight, my number 3. Alright, my number 2. Bringing the box set back up for the final time. My number 2 favorite Tarantino film of all time. There are 2 left, so I'm sure you could start guessing what you think they are. Reservoir Dogs. The impression that this film made on me when I saw it when I was 13, I saw it by myself first and then with one of my best friends, Dom. I fell in love with the storytelling. I fell in love with the violence. I fell in love with the way that Tarantino used curse words. Everything about this film, the non-linear narrative structure, which is what Tarantino is known for. Perfect narrative structure where it shows us just enough of the heist, but the majority of it is a character study that focuses on Mr. Orange and Mr. White, Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth. The relationship between those two is one of the best relationships in any Tarantino film. There is so much that these characters emote and so much that they feel, and it just emanates from the screen. So many great sequences, Mr. Blonde, of course, with the ear sequence that is just so long and drawn out and brilliant. and tough to watch even still to this day. The film really captured my imagination. I loved digging into the lore with the bottles in the background of scenes that had orange liquid and then yellow liquid and pink liquid, the balloon, and so many little foreshadowing moments that nobody would ever think twice about the first time through. But it's just Tarantino's brilliance at work. This was his first directed film besides My Best Friend's Birthday, and it's still one of his best and still one of his most original. One of the best crime heist films of all time, if not my favorite of all time. Reservoir Dogs is pure brilliance. I love everything about it. It's a 5-star perfect film and my number 2. Alright, so you could probably guess what my number 1 is at this point. It's one of the greatest films of all time. It's one of the most talked about films of all time. It's one of the most awesome films of all time. That is Pulp Fiction. And I have to mention Roger Avary here, because Roger Avary helped Tarantino write some of these stories. I don't know which ones. I don't know if he wrote some stories all by himself. I don't think so. But Roger Avary deserves to be mentioned here, and he went on to do some films I really enjoy, like Killing Zoe. Pulp Fiction, what do you say about Pulp Fiction in 2019? I mean, it is such a throwback to the lurid pulp novels that Tarantino likely grew up reading. The non-linear narrative structure, the first one I had ever seen, and it threw me for a loop but captivated me and really made me think of storytelling in such a different way. Such a brilliant crime movie. It's a crime drama, but it transcends that. It's more than that. All the characters, John Travolta as Vincent Vega, Uma Thurman as Mia. You could go on and on. Bruce Willis in this film is in one of his best roles, I think. Just the sequences in this movie you will never forget. I'll never forget seeing the scene in the basement in the Bruce Willis story with Zed, of course, and his victim. I'll never forget seeing that scene and Bruce Willis's character walking in to the madness that was going on in that little room. I was 13 or 14 when I saw it, so it obviously f***ed me up. The monologue with Chris Walken where he talks about hiding the watch in his ass. You know, the final story in this film with Harvey Keitel as the wolf. So please, with cherries on top, clean the f***ing car. I mean, so much originality. I think it's Tarantino's most original film, to be honest with you, and I think it is his masterpiece. Like I said, Inglourious Basterds is a better made movie, but Pulp Fiction is my favorite of all time and is right there with it in terms of technical prowess and just the narrative structure and the way it was made, the way it was structured. I have so many fond memories of this movie. I'll never forget the first time I watched it. I'll never forget what it did for me, how many doors it opened for me in terms of storytelling, and how much of an influence Tarantino has on my own work to this day. There's no way I can write a scene like Tarantino could. Maybe, hopefully one day, I'm not going to say never, but hopefully one day I'll be able to write a scene like he could. But his way of telling a story through dialogue is something that I'm still trying to understand and learn and put into my own work. So, I don't know where I'd be without Quentin Tarantino's movies. And here I am getting all emotional and I don't know. His movies really changed my life. I was going through a really difficult time when I was 13 years old. This was my escape. Tarantino and so many other great films, of course, but Tarantino, Scorsese, these guys' films were my escape into the world of crime, which fascinated the hell out of me in my early teens. And I don't know where film and cinema would be without Tarantino. There would be a whole lot less originality in Hollywood for sure. I feel like he's one of the last bastions in Hollywood of originality. I can go on and on about Tarantino, but I'm not going to. You guys all know his work. Maybe one day I'll do a Tarantino just talking about his work and how it makes me feel and what it did for me as a kid. But right now, I just wanted to give you guys this ranking video. Pulp Fiction is my number 1. But truth be told, I love all of his films. Even his segment in 4 Rooms and some of the other things that he's done. I just, From Dusk Till Dawn, of course, that's the other one. Man, Sin City, he helped direct. There's so many things you could talk about with Tarantino. He's one of the finest directors of all time. And the way he takes old stories and makes them new is something that only he can do. Honestly, I've never seen any other director do it as well as he has. With that said, that is my ranking of Tarantino's films, all 9 of his feature films. I love them all, but Pulp Fiction is numero uno. I just want to thank you guys for checking out my ranking of Quentin Tarantino's 9 films that he has made up to this point, not including Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tarantino is one of my favorite directors of all time, if not my favorite director of all time. And I just was so excited to sit down in anticipation for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and talk about his films, which is something I haven't done on the channel yet. So I hope you guys enjoyed this ranking. Like I said in the beginning, I'd love to see what your ranking of Tarantino's films look like. So leave those down in the comments below, and I'd love to read through them and get a discussion going as per usual. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the thumbs up button, and if you want to see more videos like it, I release about 2 a week at this point, so feel free to hit the subscribe button as well as the little bell for notifications. Anyway, guys, I will see you next time. Bored Cyborg out. Ba-da-ba.